Welcome to Capital Dialogue. I'm Bob Priddy with the Missourinet and Missourinet.com. We're glad to have you with us. Each month we talk to members of the General Assembly about what's been going on or what will be going on in the legislature. Today we're going to talk with two members of the General Assembly who are leaving us. They've been on this program several times during their legislative careers, but this will be the last time that you'll see them. Term limits have made it impossible for their constituents to ever vote to send them back to represent them here in the General Assembly. On my left is State Senator Bill Stouffer, who is from R-Napton. He has been in the legislature for 8 years, all of them in the Senate. 7 of those years he's been the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. On my right is the senior member of the General Assembly, Senator Tim Green, who is from Spanish Lake, which is in St. Louis County. He's been in the General Assembly for 24 years, 16 years in the House, and then 8 years in the State Senate as he wraps up a long career. Let me start out with you. You've been around a long time, seen a lot of changes, other than the fact that the legislature is no longer in control of your party, as it was when you started. What else has changed that is so noticeable in the General Assembly in 24 years?
Well, one of the things that always had happened in the past is when legislators served 12, 14, 16 years together, they built relationships on both sides of the aisle. You tend to, in this shorter period of time, unable to build those relationships. So a lot of that has been lost. A lot of legislative history has been lost as well. I've had several bills while serving in the Senate that I passed in the House was now trying to get repealed and trying to get up and explain why are we repealing this and educating your colleagues on why it was passed in the first place.
Do you fear the lack of institutional memory?
Oh, definitely. Term limits I have never supported. In fact, in the legislature the last 2 years, I was trying to get it extended to either 12 years or 16 years. But legislative history, knowledge of why we pass these laws, and being able to study the laws as they come up instead of quickly putting bills together, Senate committee substitutes or Senate substitutes or House committee substitutes, and continually paging through to try to keep up with the onslaught of all this different legislation that's trying to be passed.
You have been in the legislature 8 years, but have you seen things change even in that short amount of time?
Definitely. I think our class was the last one that had a real association with senators that had been there for a long period of time. There's definitely a different decorum in the Senate than what there was when I first got here. I have a concern that it's really difficult to develop leadership over that short period of time, and especially in the House. I think you have committee chairmen that just have 2 years experience and speakers that are there just for 2 years. It's really difficult to develop the kind of leadership qualities it takes to do what needs to be done for the public.
How do you feel that you were a better senator because you had this relationship with people who'd been there for a long time?
Well, I think it gives you perspective, and I think that too often there's a loss of the difference between the House and the Senate. The Senate, clear back to the Romans, was the deliberative body, the one that slowed things down. I think it was Madison that said that the House was like the teacup where you poured in the emotional issues, hot liquid. The Senate was like the saucer that cooled it, slowed the process down, and tried to give perspective, that more long-term perspective. I think a lot of that's lost, especially as you move more and more House members into the Senate. I think it becomes a small House as opposed to the deliberative body that it was intended to be.
What's been the best part of being a senator?
Oh, it's the little things. When I was here, I hadn't been here more than 3 or 4 days. I hadn't figured out how to unlock the door, and I got a call from some Girl Scouts in Macon, and they had sold Girl Scout cookies. And gone to the post office. They had 273 boxes of cookies, and went to the post office, and it was going to cost them $2 a box to send them to Iraq. And they didn't have any money, and so I get this email, what do I do? And it just so happened the Transportation Committee had a dinner that evening with UPS. I went up to the lobbyist that I had never seen before, and I said, look, I've got cookies in Macon, guys in Iraq. She said, no problem. We got planes going every day. And it didn't change the world, but for 273 guys in Iraq, they got a little taste of home. And for some girls in Macon, they got rewarded for their extra. So it's the little things that really make it worthwhile.
Little things make it worthwhile? Is that what you're going to remember the most?
Absolutely, I agree 100%. It's in society and in the daily lives, being able to make someone's daily life just a little bit less complex and being able to help them. When I first was elected to the House, I did not know what would be my passionate issues, but I had a rehabilitation center that had developmentally disabled adults in it, and I ended up with my career fighting to keep this institution open, and Senator Stouffer and I shared that passion because these people really didn't have a voice, and a lot of them no longer had parents because they were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. So they didn't have a mom and dad to wake up to. They had the state of Missouri. And getting notes and cards from parents or brothers and sisters of these individuals saying thank you for speaking to those that can't speak for themselves. There's no other reward better than that when you're an elected official.
Well, even though you're term limited out, if we didn't have term limits, do you enjoy this work enough that you would have put yourself through another campaign?
It's hard to say. I have been here, like you said, 24 years. I had a grandfather that served in the legislature 28 years. I have felt very fortunate, especially being in the Missouri Senate, being one of 34 individuals out of 5.6 million in the state of Missouri that had input to try to make certain things better for certain Missourians. And to give up that ability, sure, I'll read the newspaper, or I'll say, I wish I could have done this, or this is what I'd be doing, or I'd be speaking here. Or the simple phone call with somebody, like today I received a phone call from a constituent that had a problem, and I have contacted them with the Attorney General's office. Not being able to do that anymore will probably be the most difficult part.
You have run a couple of races apart from being a senator recently, but if term limits didn't exist, have you enjoyed this job enough that you'd like to do it another 4 years?
I do enjoy being a senator. I do think that I don't think that we ought to be here. Have a senator ought to be a senator for 30 years like in the past. I'm not sure that term limits was a proper cure. I think that I would like to see us go to 16 years serve in either house. Right now it's 8 and 8. I'd like to, if you want to keep the 16 years, so be it. But I'm really concerned about developing leadership, especially on the House end, and I think we're paying a price for the lack of experience and expertise. I mean, when you're on a committee for a period of time, you develop experience and expertise. Where with 8 years, it's going to be hard to remember what we did. You can't remember what happened 10 years ago, and you may wind up making the same mistakes over and over.
So these two gentlemen are running out of time now to serve in the General Assembly, and they'll never be able to come back again as the law now stands. Tim Green is 49 years old.
Yes.
Fairly young guy to be ending a career.
Right.
I want to ask you, you're older than 49, but still young
65.
enough. 65. 65, but still that's pretty young too. So these two guys could come back, but the law is going to have to change before people like this have a chance to do that. We'll be back, though, in a minute.
I don't miss my car, and I feel safe when I ride this bus. A little over a year ago, I got my car demolished. So I gave up on driving, and I'm their best customer. I go everywhere on that bus 5 days a week. That's just part of my life now. I enjoy the camaraderie. The drivers are really good drivers, and they look after us. I just feel safe when I ride this bus.
To find out how rural public transportation can put more life in your day, just give us a call.
Mayday, mayday. I need help.
Vessel in distress. This is the United States Coast Guard.
There are many thankless jobs out there. This isn't one of them.
We're talking with two veteran members of the General Assembly on this edition of Capitol Dialogue. Both of these people are leaving the legislature because of term limits. Tim Green from St. Louis County is leaving after 24 years, 16 in the House and 8 in the Senate. And Senator Bill Stouffer of R-Napton is leaving after 8 years in the Senate. Money is something that the government has struggled with ever since I started covering it. That's longer ago even than you were here. You were a House Budget Chairman at one time, have served on the Senate Appropriations Committee throughout your term. What's the secret to funding state programs?
Well, you always have to look at the source of the funding. We use our so-called general revenue dollars from income tax and sales tax. So when people are working, they're able to pay taxes on their income, and then when they purchase products, because they have disposable dollars that they can purchase products, then you're getting sales tax. With the economy and the way the unemployment has been, less income tax also means less purchasing power, less sales tax. You're going to have the issues to deal with. Higher education has received a lot of cuts over the years. Elementary and secondary has remained stable, but has not risen, even though the schools are demanding more. It just takes money to operate education, or it takes money to operate prisons for people's public safety. And you have to realize nothing comes for free, so you're going to have to pay taxes to get your safety, to get your education, to get your parks. Government is not bad. It just needs to be funded, and when there's no funds, you're going to cut programs.
Senator Stouffer, I don't know how many times I've talked to you in the last 7 years as chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee about funding for transportation. And in all those 7 years, nobody's really come up with an answer about how to take care of our roads and bridges. And now the funding is even much less than it was before. What's the problem in getting people to want to pay for the things they use, like roads and bridges?
Well, one of the difficult problems with transportation is that all transportation is local. And so if I don't see it, I'm not interested in it. And that's an attitude that we've got to change. Our parents and grandparents built the interstate system, and we have used it up. It is I-70's in almost 60 years into its 20-year life. And I-44 is not far behind. We need to deal with transportation funding. I do not see the federal government coming through with, I mean, you know, that money comes out of our pocket too, but I do not see the federal government having the ability to fund transportation. I think we in Missouri need to do that ourselves. It's something I'm very passionate about, have searched for since 2006 as the transportation chair. And but I think there's a good case to be made. If we don't, then we're going to return to the roads that we had prior to 2004, and everybody will complain about the roads. But the key to economic growth is transportation. I've got 3 towns in my district, a very rural district, that grew, and all of them are on 4-lane highways. And that's the reason Jefferson City's here, because the Missouri River's out here. So transportation is the key to, I think, the bloodstream of our economy, and we're going to have to address it.
There's been a special committee taking a look at potential funding sources for transportation during the summer. And I talked to the co-chairman of it after they had a meeting in central Missouri not long ago, and I said, look, the people in politics have been spending so many years convincing the public that we don't need to have any more taxes. How are you going to finance improvements in the roads without increasing the taxes? And how are you going to now reverse that and say, oh, folks, we've been telling you all these years we don't need to increase taxes, now we need to increase taxes. Is that going to be a big hurdle?
Oh, it's a hurdle, but people have to see what the value is, and I think that you present the opportunity, and MoDOT has changed their reputation in the last 7 years, 8 years. They are probably one of the most efficient transportation departments in the United States. They are getting good value for the tax dollars. The truth of the matter is that they're running on $1992. We haven't raised their income since 1992. We continue to go to more efficient vehicles, not fewer vehicles, but more efficient vehicles. So right now, fuel income is starting to go the other way. We're going to have to change the way we fund transportation, and I think it's a discussion that we have to have. We're starting a joint transportation interim committee tomorrow that we will talk about how we fund this and try to get input from the public and get some buy-in.
Well, he's talking about $1992 for transportation. You talked about education a few minutes ago, and I'm sure there are other programs. What kind of dollars do we have for other parts of state government?
We're running very stringent on the resources we have. Growth has not been there, but costs has continued to rise. Medicaid has risen, cost of health care. It's the saying is people want services from government, but people do not want to pay for the services. But there's times people do believe government should be doing this. And when you throw out a number like a $22 billion budget, people say, well, that's plenty of money. But then you also have to explain all the different programs and all the different roads, sewer systems, everything, all infrastructure you have to pay for, and public safety, like I said. But I sit here and listen to Senator Stouffer about the 1992 gas tax. It tells me maybe I have been here too long because I voted for that gas tax.
But that was a 6-cent gas tax, wasn't it?
That was a 6-cent gas tax, 2 cents over, I believe, 3 or 6 year period, I can't remember. And the funny thing about that is to get it through the legislature, some of the commitments made by the highway department, chief engineer was called that time, was there was going to be a 4-lane highway to every town with 5,000. And there just was not ever enough resources to do that. So to get to that 6 cents approval without the vote of the people, there were promises made that the public felt they were lied to. So that's where a lot of frustration came. But like Senator Stouffer said, people are worried about safety on the roads as well. I just read Texas is raising part of their highway up to 85 miles an hour. Trucks are going faster. You need more lanes on Highway 70 and Interstate 44, but you have to come up with resources.
Coming up with resources is going to be something for the next generation of the General Assembly after these gentlemen leave. It's an issue that is going to be affecting education, highways, health care, you name it, whatever it is, it touches your life. It's also in one way or another going to touch your pocketbook. The question is, will the next generation of the legislature decide to touch your pocketbook a little bit more than they have been? We'll explore more things with these departing members of the General Assembly in a minute.
Has anyone ever said, you're the picture of health? You look healthy and you feel fine. But that may not be the full picture. Colorectal cancer is the #2 cancer killer. It doesn't always cause symptoms, but it can be prevented. Get screened. Make sure you are the picture of health.
To learn about screening in St. Louis, call 314-879-6392. That's 314-879-6392.
All across Missouri, people are making a difference. AmeriCorps, providing resources to meet human needs. Vista, building better communities. Learn and Serve, promoting the service of youth. Senior Corps, sharing wisdom and experience. Make a difference, be a volunteer. This message brought to you by the Missouri Community Service Commission. For more information, visit movolunteers.org or call 877-210-7611.
On Capitol Dialogue today, we're talking to 2 retiring members of the General Assembly. Both have been term limited out. Senator Tim Green from St. Louis County from Spanish Lake has served 24 years, and Bill Stouffer from Napton has served 8 years, all of them in the state Senate. You 2 have run your last campaigns now, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about where we need to go in terms of regulating the flow of money in campaigns. Do you see a problem, other than the fact that you didn't get enough?
You know, the one thing that made me feel uncomfortable the first time I ran in 2004 was that we were limited to $600 donation. But I could tell somebody they could go contribute to this committee, and then I'd get the money. I don't know how you curtail the flow of dollars. I think transparency is by far the best gauge. I think it's up to the individual, to the public, to look at who people are taking money from, and judge them accordingly. If they do not, we live in our republic takes participatory of the citizens, and if they don't participate, then they're going to get what they get. And I'm not a term limit fan. I believe that transparency is the way to do that. It just bothers me a lot to see money traveling around different directions to wind up in the same campaign.
Should there be some kind of a requirement that a candidate get a certain percentage of his donations from a large group of people instead of relying on 2 or 3 large donors?
Again, it's up to the public to make that decision. And I the citizens have to be citizens. That's their responsibility, and I think that is a major control, is transparency.
In 24 years, you've probably seen, I don't know how many different changes in campaign finance laws over the years. But when you started out, it was a whole different world than the way it is now, and it's changed 2 or 3 times probably during your career.
Right. I was, once again, here so long that I was here when they created the ethics department in the state of Missouri. When I first ran, it was run out of the Secretary of State's office, where you filed your reports. It has changed, but I am a Democrat who has to be honest and say, I do not agree with campaign contribution limits. The same reason Senator Stouffer said for transparency. You can give, all these different committees created can give all this money. I would prefer the people know, if you're getting a $50,000 contribution, who it's coming from, instead of an individual writing $50,000 checks out of all these different committees. So you're not going to take money out of politics. We know that. We look at the history of our nation, the history of our state. Money is always going to be there. There has to be an ability of the public to educate themselves and make the assumption when they vote, whether this $50,000 or $100,000 contribution to this candidate will make you vote for another candidate because you feel uncomfortable that candidate will not be sincere on your issues. The public does have a responsibility to educate. But I do want to add one thing, a caveat separate from Senator Stouffer's remark, is what we need to do to make elections better is make them more accessible. This early voting needs to become part of our voting process in the state. For me to go in and say, I can't vote election day because I'll be out of town, is ludicrous. If I want to vote 2 weeks before, I should be able to vote. And we need to entice more people to participate instead of creating barriers to make less people want to participate.
Should people have to show a photo ID to vote?
People should have to show some form of identification. Now, when we fought this issue back in 2005, I had a citizen who did not have a birth certificate, did not have a driver's license. In the process to go through for this individual that was in a nursing home, they would not be able to get a photo ID. So there has to be, if you were to do a photo ID, some assurances that people that cannot get the accessibility to get a photo ID should be taken care of as well. And that's an issue we really never delved into. We tried to, in my opinion, tried to make it more difficult for people to vote. And we should entice and get more and more people to vote.
That's another thing that is left over from you guys' service that hasn't been determined. How do you feel about photo ID?
Well, I carried the photo ID bill in 2011 successfully. We had exemptions for those folks that couldn't get. To me, it's a basic level of security. I mean, you have to have a photo ID to rent a movie, to pick up a hotel reservation. You can't participate in our society without a photo ID. I think if there are some folks out there that don't have it, then we ought to help them get it so they can be participate more fully in society. I think the numbers of those folks that don't have it are somewhat exaggerated. We asked for the files in 2011, and I picked out three precincts in my Senate district. That's not it's not random scientifically, but what we came up with in 10 minutes in the office, we'd explain 93% of the discrepancies between the photo ID roll or the government-issued ID rolls and voter registration rolls. Most of it is just an initial or a nickname or something that's very, very easy to explain. The governor or the attorney general in Georgia had more resources, and he was able to explain 98.9% of the differences. So I think there's a very small number that are in the same, in what Timmy's talking about, and it's we need to help those folks get a photo ID so they can participate in our society.
Let's just switch a little bit and get more personal. You've been in the Senate 8 years. Before that, you held public office back home.
I was a school board member.
Right. What drives you to serve the public as a school board member, as a senator? What really lit your fire on this?
Well, I've always tried to give back to the community. I think that you live beyond your. I mean, there's a lot of things that contribute to society that need leadership and need participation, and I've tried to participate in those institutions. I think I enjoy helping people. I just enjoy serving the public. It's really neat when you can help somebody get over a hurdle that they're having trouble with, and I just enjoy doing it.
24 years is a long time. What got you started in this business?
I had, like I said, a kind of family tradition of public service. I had a grandfather that served, and when I grew up, I wanted to be like my grandfather and like my father. So I'm an electrician like my father and a politician like my grandfather. So the interest was created being the grandson of a politician, and then he was long gone. I didn't walk into this, and when I had a chance at 23 years old to file for office, I did it, and I had a lot of people tell me, you're going to lose, and my mother and I knocked on 10,000 doors, and we won. And I tell people now when I see 23, 24-year-olds filing for office, I think to myself, boy, I was a little cocky there, thinking I could pull it off. But the participation I have loved, and it has been not only a joy serving people, but the education I have received. I have been paid elected official, but I know a little about a lot of different things. I've spent time on colleagues' cattle farms, never been on a cattle farm. I've toured the state. I understand the needs of Southeast Missouri. The needs are different from the needs of Northwest Missouri. And I've traveled to Springfield and to Joplin. You know, traveled the state, been educated, and been able to help a few people along the way. It's been a pretty terrific 24 years for me.
We have to tell you that we've worked with these two guys, Senator Green for his 24 years in the House and the Senate, and Senator Stouffer from R-Napton in the 8 years that he's been in the Senate. They've been excellent people to work with, and they're pretty straight shooters when you come right down to it. And we appreciate their service, and we appreciate you being with us on this edition of Capitol Dialogue. We'll see you next month.